Well, let's move on to more death and destruction. Of course, if we have governments that are prepared to carry out euthanasia on its own citizens, war overseas by proxy is no problem at all. We've got a little video clip here, which I'm just using to highlight the style of the war in Ukraine. Much of the fighting is in built-up areas, but in many cases, it's men trying to hide in ditches or in tree lines with a few armoured vehicles that are being taken out very quickly, particularly if there are drones in the air. And we can see the horror of this situation where armoured vehicles are destroyed, and you can see the men very clearly on the ground around them. This is happening largely as the result of Russian weapon systems, but Ukraine also operating drones in this way, and men being killed on both sides. But of course, the story which the West is really not sure how to frame concerns Bakhmut, and this is where the bulk of the fighting at the moment in a built-up area is taking place in Ukraine. So the Telegraph with an interesting headline here: inside Bakhmut, the strange and senseless death trap draining Ukraine's tired army. So that's the headline, but if you read the article very quickly, it's spun as though the Ukrainians are mowing down thousands of Russians who are charging in useless attacks against the Ukrainian positions. But in fact, something else is going on. If we can just pop that one on screen. Just want to bring this comment in here. The Telegraph is clearly confused because in the headline it describes what is really happening. It describes a death trap draining Ukraine's tired army. But it's clear when we look at the article itself, the Telegraph can't understand what's happening. If we get into just part of it, and we'll just highlight here, it says some conflict experts say Russians' obsession with the city has become nothing more than a ploy to drain Ukraine's armed forces of their limited resources. So something is going on in this city. The Ukrainians don't want to let Bakhmut go. The Russians are clearly want to take it. But we've got conflict experts who are confused because it appears it's doing nothing more than draining Ukraine's armed forces of their limited resources. Well, of course, amongst the tragedy of the thousands and thousands of Ukrainian killed and wounded, what we've got is the reality that this is the last bastion of defense for Ukraine. If Bakhmut falls, it undermines the whole Ukrainian defensive line. And the Russians are in no hurry to do this because at the moment they are simply drawing in thousands of Ukrainian forces and reinforcements, and they're killing them. And so the Telegraph doesn't want to talk about the reality of what's happening on the ground. We've got to go to social media to actually have a look. And of course, if you look at any area across Ukraine, the first thing you can see is the thousands and thousands of artillery shells. Those artillery shells are creating the deaths. Russia is firing 9-1 in a ratio to the Ukrainians, and yet US, UK, NATO and EU dare not mention the Ukrainian casualties. And the reason, of course, is that those casualties are so high because Ukraine is losing the war. What the West needs to do is stop the war. Let's look at this little clip. We've shown thermite or phosphorus, as some people claim it is. We don't know, but just to show the sheer horror of how troops are being cleared out from tree lines and amongst small built-up areas. Let's have a look at this video clip. Well, that really shows it all. A truly horrible situation. Of course, anybody touched by that falling thermite or phosphorus is going to be extremely badly injured, if not killed. But of course, this is huge areas now being laid to waste. But at the moment, nobody in the West wants to stop the war, because the war is good for the ultimate agenda, which is supposedly regime change in Russia. But other reports coming in show that the casualties amongst mercenaries are now increasing. And this is just two individuals, or these are two individuals that I've taken from social media. I'm taking the reports as correct. But it's very interesting that we've now got a female mercenary identified as being recently killed, according to the report. I'm going to put in a question here, which is, why is the BBC not calling for equality to be enforced on the front line, with 50-50 male to female fighters on the Ukrainian side? Apparently all of that BBC agenda has gone out of the window. But the tragedy is nobody in the West is calling to stop this war. The agenda is to get more weapons in. And if that's not bad enough, we've now got Britain boasting that it's going to be setting up a new fighter with the support of Italy and Japan. And this apparently, according to Rishi Sunak, is going to help us increase our military intervention capability in the Indo-Pacific regions. So no sign of backtracking on anything other than war is good, and we need more, Mike.
Yes, indeed. Right.